It was one of those mornings that felt off from the second I walked into the office. The coffee machine was broken, the elevator took forever to arrive, and when I finally got to my desk, my phone buzzed with a meeting invite I wasn't expecting. HR and the new manager, Vance, wanted to talk. Now, I wasn't exactly sure what this was about, but the last few weeks had felt tense. I'd been pushing hard to close a few big accounts, but something about the atmosphere at work had shifted. People were talking in hushed tones, avoiding eye contact when I passed by. My gut told me this wasn't going to be a casual chat about numbers. I sat in the sterile HR conference room, staring at the laminated table, waiting for them to show up. Deirdre from HR walked in first, all business. She didn't even smile. Then Vance followed, that smug grin he wore like it was his signature move. He was new to the company, but it was clear his rise had been fast. Too fast, if you asked me. "Ethan, thank you for coming," Deirdre said, her voice clipped. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We've been reviewing some of your recent performance data, and we have some concerns." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my face neutral. I wasn't about to let them see me sweat. "Concerns?" I echoed. "What kind of concerns?" Vance, who'd been standing off to the side, slid a few papers across the table toward me. I didn't even have to look at them to know what this was about. Falsifying sales data. It was always the same thing when a company wanted to clean house. "Ethan," Vance started, glancing at Deirdre for support. "We've found discrepancies in your reports. Sales numbers don't match up. And there are some serious concerns about accuracy." His tone was calm, controlled, but there was a thin layer of something darker underneath. Maybe it was a power move, or maybe it was a warning. My heart started to race, but I kept my breathing steady. I'd been through audits before. I knew how to handle these things. I glanced at the papers. They were the reports I had submitted, printed out, with lines highlighted in red. The numbers didn't add up. Of course they didn't. They'd been altered. "That's not true," I said, the words coming out easier than I expected. "I've been submitting the numbers as per the system." Deirdre didn't flinch. She just nodded. "We're aware of your submission process, but the data has been manipulated, and we're afraid this goes against company policy." They were accusing me of something I didn't do, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I looked at Vance, who was now eyeing me with that smug look like he had me cornered. I could feel my blood start to boil, but I kept it together. "So, what are you saying? You're firing me?" Vance nodded slowly as though he was savoring the moment. "We believe termination is the best course of action." "Not so fast," I said, cutting him off. "I have something you should see first." Deirdre raised an eyebrow. She was clearly taken aback by my sudden shift in demeanor. "What's that supposed to mean?" I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Their faces barely registered any change as I opened the email app. But I knew what I had. Evidence, hard evidence. I hit send, and the email appeared on the screen. I'd been preparing for this moment for months, saving every email, every report, every record of the tampered data. What they didn't know was, I had copies of all my submissions, time-stamped and date-stamped, showing how the numbers had been altered each time. "This is what it means," I said, tapping the screen. I slid my phone across the table toward them. Deirdre glanced down, and I could see her eyes flicker with shock as she saw the time-stamped logs. She picked up the phone and looked at it again, then back at Vance. His face had gone pale. I smiled, leaning back in my chair, arms crossed. "Funny thing about company policy. You're allowed to keep personal records. I've got everything you've been changing." I let that sink in for a moment. "And you're not the only one doing it." Vance looked like he was trying to piece together what I was saying, but the realization hit him too late. I wasn't just talking about me. I had data on 5 other salespeople who had been screwed over by Vance's little scheme. Bonus amounts were shifted, numbers were altered, all to line his own pockets and prop up his star players. I wasn't going down without a fight, and now I had the ammunition to win. Vance's eyes narrowed. "What do you think you're doing?" "What do you think you're doing?" I fired back. "I'm exposing this. You've been taking credit for other people's work, sabotaging careers to boost your own. And now you're going to answer for it." Deirdre opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she just looked at Vance, then back at me, before slowly standing. "We'll have to review this," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "This will be escalated. You've left us no choice." Good, I said, standing up to face them. Because I'm not going anywhere until you fix this. You've got a whole lot more to explain. The silence stretched between us as I slid my phone across the table. Deirdre picked it up, her fingers hesitating for a split second before she glanced at the screen. I could feel the tension in the air shift, like the ground had just shifted beneath their feet. "What's this?" Vance asked, his voice trying to stay steady but betraying a hint of uncertainty. "This," I said, leaning back, "is the beginning of the end for you." I didn't wait for their response. I had the evidence, and I wasn't about to let them wriggle out of it. I pulled out my personal log folder, every sales report I had submitted over the past 6 years, date-stamped and meticulously saved in my private email for situations just like this. The ones they didn't expect me to have. I pulled up the most recent file, the one that showed the altered numbers. "You've been cutting my numbers," I said, not even bothering to keep my voice down. "Always by 17%. And always, those cuts shifted over to Connor's name." Vance's jaw tightened, his smug demeanor faltered, and Deirdre, who had been sitting stone-faced the whole time, suddenly looked uncomfortable. They didn't realize they were stepping on a landmine? I scrolled through the emails, showing them how the changes had been systematically done, listing the specific dates when I had submitted reports and when the system log showed the alterations had been made. I even pointed out the moments when Vance himself had logged in under his credentials, altering figures. The evidence was irrefutable. "And it's not just me," I continued, pacing slowly as I watched their faces change. 5 other salespeople have had the same thing happen. Sales records altered, bonuses tied to falsified numbers. So, when you think you're firing a guy over bad data, just remember, you've been detonating a bomb that's going to bring down more than just my career. The color drained from Deirdre's face as I rattled off names. People who had been pushed out because their numbers had been falsified, all for Vance's benefit. I had proof of each and every one. I even mentioned how it lined up with the times Vance had been caught socializing with Connor at work events, making his preference for him clear. Vance's face twisted into something cold. "This is absurd," he snapped, but his voice wasn't as sure as before. I clicked another file open, time system logs from our shared company drive. The timestamps showed everything. I had them all. "You know," I said, leaning forward, "company policy says I can keep personal logs for review purposes. I'm protected by that. But you're not protected by anything. You've been running this company like it's your personal playground. And you thought you could just fire me, make me disappear. Well, it's time you answer for what you've been doing." Deirdre's eyes darted to Vance, who was now fidgeting with the papers in front of him. I could see him running the numbers in his head, trying to figure out how to salvage this. But it was too late. He wiped his hand over his face, then leaned back in his chair, clearly not sure what to say. "This is just a misunderstanding," he stammered, but his voice was hollow, lacking the usual venom it had when he first walked in. "No misunderstanding," I said coolly. "This is you being caught in your own web, and it's only a matter of time before everyone sees it." Deirdre stood up, the tension between us thick enough to slice with a knife. "We'll have to escalate this," she said, her voice much more unsure now. "We'll be contacting legal. This is a lot to process." I smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind that told them they were about to lose everything. "Take your time," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." Vance was already fumbling for his phone, no doubt trying to call someone to handle the fallout. But as I watched them scramble, something shifted. I was no longer the one in the hot seat. They were, and I had no intention of letting up until they faced the consequences of their actions. The air in the room thickened as legal and ethics walked in like an army ready for battle. My heart didn't race this time. I'd already won. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the whole company waking up to what had been happening right under their noses. Deirdre was still at the table, but she looked like she wished she could vanish. Vance, on the other hand, had gone from smug to pale in seconds, his hands shaking ever so slightly as he tried to keep his cool. The lawyers and ethics teams, all in crisp suits and poker faces, filled the room. There were more of them than I'd expected. I realized in that moment that my decision to expose the corruption wasn't just going to change my future, it was going to change theirs too. The first person to speak was one of the ethics consultants. She looked over at Vance, who had somehow managed to straighten his tie in the middle of the storm. Ethan, she said, addressing me with a certain cold professionalism. Can you explain the scale of the issue here? I leaned forward, keeping my hands in front of me, calm and controlled. This wasn't just about the numbers. This was about the principle. The issue here, I started, is that I've been a target of tampered records for over a year. But it's not just me. It's the whole department. My numbers were changed, my performance sabotaged, and bonuses manipulated to redirect funds into other pockets. The lawyer sitting across from me scribbled something down, but the look in his eyes said it all. This was bigger than they had expected. And how much money are we talking about? He asked, his tone shifting from curiosity to alarm. I didn't hesitate. I lost nearly $52,000 in bonuses last year alone. That's not counting the countless hours of overtime I worked, putting in results that weren't reflected in my paycheck. That's just the beginning. The room seemed to grow quieter, and the tension turned from one of suspicion to an uncomfortable reality for everyone present. I could feel their eyes on me, some of them looking at Vance, others at Deirdre, but none of them looking at me like I was the problem anymore. How far does this go? Asked another member of the legal team, his voice soft but filled with an edge of disbelief. I pulled up more files, showing how the numbers had shifted on a regular basis, always landing in Connor's name, the so-called Golden Boy. Take a look at these, I said, passing my phone to the lawyer closest to me. The timestamps show not just Vance's login, but Connor's as well. They've been systematically altering the performance records across the board. Not just me. 5 others in the department have experienced the same thing. The lawyer took a moment to review the data. His face drained of color, and when he looked up, his eyes met mine with a new level of wariness. This is going to get out of hand quickly, he muttered. I could feel Deirdre's gaze shift toward Vance, who had begun to fidget with his papers, his arrogance from earlier gone. There was no denying it now. He was cornered. Vance, I said, almost as if I were addressing a child caught in a lie. You've been manipulating the system for months, maybe longer. You're not just erasing my work, you've been erasing everyone's. I could see Deirdre struggle to come up with something, anything that could excuse what had been going on, but she remained silent. The moment was too big. She knew they were in over their heads now. The ethical consultant cleared her throat, breaking the silence. This isn't just about your bonus, Ethan. This is a systemic issue, a pattern of abuse that could be much larger than we initially thought. Vance finally looked up, his face twisted with anger. This is a misunderstanding, he said through gritted teeth, but even his voice lacked conviction. The dam had already cracked. You've been playing a game you can't win, I said, feeling a sense of satisfaction rise in me. And now, you're not just going to lose your job, you're going to lose everything. The head of legal turned to Deirdre. Get me the full list of impacted employees. This goes straight to an investigation now. The level of corruption here is unacceptable. For the first time, Vance looked like he might collapse. The air in the room shifted from cold disbelief to genuine tension. His gaze met mine, and for a moment, there was nothing but pure hatred in his eyes. Ethan, I'm not going down for this, he said, his voice laced with a venomous edge. You already are, I said flatly. The only question is, how many others will go with you? And just like that, the room erupted into a whirlwind of discussions, phone calls, and decisions being made in rapid succession. Vance and Deirdre were quickly escorted out, the legal team now taking over the room. The rest of the team from HR and legal scrambled, unsure of how to handle the scale of what had just been exposed. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time, I could feel something shifting inside me. This wasn't just about me getting back what was rightfully mine. It was about tearing down a system built on lies and manipulation. It was about making sure no one else ever had to go through this again. Monday morning felt surreal, like I was still floating in some twisted dream. The air in the office was different, charged with an unease I couldn't shake. Everywhere I went, whispers seemed to follow. Legal and ethics had already started their investigation into Vance and Deirdre's actions, and the ripple effect was starting to rock the company. People who had stayed out of the drama were beginning to take sides. But my head was in a different space. I wasn't focused on what was happening around me. I was thinking about what was coming next. Then I got the call. Ethan, Lorraine Templeton would like to see you in her office, the CEO herself. My first thought was, here we go, a settlement. They're going to try and pay me off to keep this quiet. I'd been through the process in my head 100 times. Take the severance, walk away, start fresh. But that wasn't me. Not anymore. When I walked into Lorraine's office, I was met with an aura of authority. She was sitting behind her sleek desk, her usual poised demeanor, calm but piercing. Lorraine was known for being tough, no nonsense. But there was something different about her today. Her eyes weren't cold, they were calculating. "Ethan, come in, sit down." She gestured to the chair across from her, and I took it, forcing myself to remain calm. "First, I want to acknowledge everything you've uncovered. You've done something we should have done a long time ago," she started. Her tone was measured, but there was an edge of genuine respect that I hadn't expected. "I didn't do it for respect," I said quietly. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." She nodded slowly, like she had already anticipated that response. "Right," she said, leaning forward slightly. "And that's why I'm offering you something more than just back pay and a severance package. You've exposed corruption at the highest levels, but I want you to help fix it. I'm offering you a seat on a new compensation oversight committee. You'll be in charge of restructuring the system. Your role will be pivotal in rebuilding the trust within this company." I wasn't sure I had heard her correctly. My first instinct was to ask, "Why me?" But before I could say anything, she continued, "This company needs real change, and I need someone who understands the system, someone who has the inside knowledge, who can walk us through what's been happening and help us put an end to it. Vance would have paid you to disappear, but I'm asking you to lead the charge to fix what he broke." I sat there, stunned, the weight of her words sinking in. She wasn't offering me a way out. She was offering me the chance to be the one who shaped the future of the company, the chance to go from being a victim of a corrupt system to the person who would hold it accountable. I leaned forward, the questions bubbling up inside me. "And you trust me to do this? After everything that's happened?" Lorraine's eyes didn't waver. "I trust you more than I trust anyone else in this company right now. You've proven that you can't be bought. You've proven that you care more about integrity than power. That's why I'm offering you this position. We need someone who can not only expose the truth, but ensure that it doesn't happen again." The weight of her words hit me hard. I had spent 6 years building the sales program, pouring everything into the job, only to be blindsided by the very people I had trusted. But now, here I was, being offered the opportunity to not just expose the problem, but to be the one to fix it from the inside. I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, relief, fear. But beneath it all, there was a flicker of something else: hope. "You're giving me a leadership role?" I asked, my voice steady, but underneath, I could feel the adrenaline building. "Why not just cut me loose, pay me off, and let me go quietly?" Lorraine smiled, but it wasn't a smile of triumph. It was more like a knowing look, like she had expected this question. Because that's what Vance would have done, and I don't want the same kind of leadership he brought here. I need someone who'll make real changes. Someone who'll lead from the front, not from behind a desk. I sat back in my chair, the weight of it all starting to settle in. My gut told me this was the right move. Not for revenge, not for the money, but for change. This was my chance to do more than just expose the rot. I could be the one to tear it out by the roots and rebuild from the ground up. "And if I say yes?" I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. Lorraine's smile widened, a little more genuine this time. "You'll not only restore your reputation, but you'll be in a position to restore the company's. You'll have the power to reshape everything, from the bonuses to the tracking systems. We're going to put transparency at the core of how we operate, and I need you to be the one to lead it." I felt the shift within me. I wasn't being offered a way out. I was being offered the power to make a difference. And it wasn't just about me anymore. This was bigger than that. This was about setting things right. For me, for the employees who had been mistreated, for the company that had forgotten what integrity looked like. "I'm in," I said, finally finding my voice. "But I'll do it my way." Lorraine nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. I wouldn't expect anything less. And just like that, everything changed. I didn't waste any time once I got the position. The company was a ticking time bomb, and I wasn't about to let it blow up in my face. As soon as I walked out of Lorraine's office with the title of head of the new compensation oversight committee, I immediately called for a full audit. There was no way I could fix this from the top down without first knowing how deep the rot really went. The audit process was grueling. I sat with my new team of analysts, combing through years of performance reports, matching every figure, every bonus payment, and every report submitted with my personal logs. It didn't take long before we found exactly what I knew we would. More than 7 other employees had been impacted by the same tampering I had experienced. Vance had systematically altered their numbers, sales reports adjusted, bonuses slashed, and credit given to the people who had the right connections. Each new discovery was another blow, but also another victory. I wasn't alone anymore. I had a team with me, people who wanted to fix the company, not just let it limp along. It was a slow process, but we finally had enough evidence to move forward. As the days passed, I noticed something. It wasn't just the numbers that had been adjusted. It was the whole culture of the company that needed to change. Employees who had been afraid to speak out, employees who had been pushed down and told to shut up, came to me in private meetings, thanking me for finally making their voices count. "You've finally made my work matter," one of the women on my team told me as we sat in a small meeting room. "I can't tell you how many times I've had to watch my numbers disappear, and I just had to sit there and smile. I thought it was just me." "It wasn't just you," I said, leaning back in my chair. "It was all of us. But now, we fix it." With the audit nearly complete, the company had no choice but to do what it should have done years ago, rebuild from the ground up. I spearheaded a project to develop a new tracking system, one that would flag every change made to performance metrics, with a timestamp and a clear login identifier. If anyone tried to alter the numbers again, we'd know exactly who did it, when they did it, and why. The first round of quarterly audits was completed without a hitch, and my new system caught several discrepancies almost immediately. But instead of sweeping things under the rug like before, we flagged them for review. Connor was the first casualty of the new system. As soon as his performance reports started coming under scrutiny, he resigned before his review could even finish. It was a victory, but it wasn't enough. I knew I had to keep going. I started meeting with colleagues from other departments, making sure they knew how to use the new tools and reminding them that this system was about transparency, fairness, and accountability, not just for me, but for everyone. Then one afternoon, I received a message from a colleague in HR who had been one of Vance's biggest supporters. She stopped by my office, her face tense but hopeful. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, nervously glancing around before sitting down. "I don't know if you know this, but you've made a real difference around here. The way you've cleaned up the data, the way you've fixed what was broken. People are talking, and for once, it's good stuff." I nodded, not needing the praise, but appreciating it nonetheless. I'm just getting started. As the weeks passed, more employees came to me, quietly expressing their gratitude for the changes I'd made. The women who'd had their numbers fudged started showing up at my office, stopping by to say thanks. I had no illusions. They weren't doing it because they thought I was some kind of hero. They were doing it because, for the first time in years, they had a chance to prove their worth and get credit for their hard work. One afternoon, as I was finishing a meeting with my team, one of the junior saleswomen, Sarah, walked in with a stack of papers. She placed them on my desk. "Ethan," she said, "I wanted to give you something. These are my reports for the last 6 months. I haven't seen my real numbers in years, but now I'm seeing them for the first time." I took the papers from her, feeling a surge of pride. The smile on her face said everything. This wasn't just about fixing the system. This was about restoring dignity, restoring fairness. "Good job," I said as I flipped through the papers. "Your numbers look great. You've earned it." And that was when I realized revenge wasn't just about winning. It wasn't about showing up Vance or Deirdre or even the people who had always doubted me. It was about creating something better, something that would outlast this battle. I had become part of something bigger, not just a manager, not just an employee. I was a leader, and I had built a system that couldn't be corrupted again. The backlash started slow. At first, it was little things, muted greetings in the hallway, averted eyes in the break room. People who had once been friendly now gave me the cold shoulder. It wasn't unexpected. You don't expose a system as rotten as the one I'd just pulled back the curtain on without ruffling some feathers. But it wasn't just the silent treatment I had to contend with. The real trouble began when Noah from trading cornered me one afternoon, just outside the elevator. His arms were crossed tightly across his chest, his jaw clenched. "You know, you really did a number on this place," he said, his voice low but sharp, the words coated in resentment. I didn't know where this was going, but I could already tell it wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. What's that supposed to mean? He glared at me for a moment, and then he spoke again, his voice tinged with spite. You're a corporate watchdog now, huh? Watching everyone's back but your own. I raised an eyebrow. I'm doing what needs to be done. Yeah, well, you made a lot of enemies, Noah said, his voice dripping with disdain. People don't like being shown up. Don't think this little moral victory of yours is going to protect you when things start falling apart. I didn't rise to the bait. I'm not the one making enemies here. I'm just cleaning up the mess others left behind. Noah sneered. Keep telling yourself that, Ethan. He turned on his heel and walked away, leaving me to ponder his words. But I knew one thing for sure. Noah wasn't going to be the last person to come after me. 3 months later, I got a taste of the real fallout. The Jenkins pitch, one of the largest, most lucrative accounts we had all year, was scheduled to be presented by me. This was supposed to be my moment to shine, to demonstrate that the new systems and transparency we had put in place would bring in results. It was everything I had worked for in the past few months, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Then the sabotage started. It began with the presentation slides. I opened the file just hours before the pitch and noticed something was off. Data was missing, key figures were altered, the analysis wasn't as thorough as I'd prepared it. Whoever had touched it didn't just make a mistake, they had intentionally undermined my work. I could feel the panic setting in. If I presented this, I was going to lose the account. Worse, I'd lose any shred of credibility I had with the board and clients. I didn't panic. Not yet. I opened the file's version history and started digging. The timestamp said it all. The edits had been made that morning, just hours before my meeting, and the name attached to the file? Noah. I felt my blood run cold. I checked it again. Same name, same time, same edits. I wasted no time. I grabbed my phone and called IT, keeping my voice low, but controlled. I need you to track a file. The Jenkins pitch slides. Someone altered them. Can you confirm who made those changes? Within the hour, IT confirmed what I already knew. Noah had accessed the file. The changes were deliberate, and they were meant to sabotage my presentation. I didn't waste any more time thinking about it. I forwarded everything to legal and HR, along with a copy of the original slides and the unaltered data. Noah from trading, I wrote in the email. He's the one who sabotaged the presentation. I need action. Minutes later, I received confirmation. Legal was on it. Noah's fate was sealed. The next day, Noah was escorted out of the building by security. He didn't even get a chance to protest. It was fast, clean, and efficient. He was done. Just like that. But the damage had been done. The sabotage almost cost me the pitch. I was in the conference room preparing for the presentation when I got the call that the client was pulling out. The news hit hard. Jenkins had decided to go with a competitor. I was furious, but I knew I had to keep my cool. I couldn't let anyone see the cracks forming. I spent the next few hours trying to salvage what I could, speaking to the clients, trying to reframe the situation as a fluke, as something out of my control, but I could see in their eyes they were skeptical. The damage was real. The trust I had been building over the past few months felt fragile now. It was only later, when I walked into my office, that I realized what had happened. The sabotage, the quiet whispers in the hallways, the sabotage of my biggest deal, it had all been part of something bigger. Noah wasn't the only one who resented me, but at least I had one thing in my favor. The new system I'd built. I went through the logs, looking for patterns, and that's when I saw it. Every time I'd made a significant move, every time the company made a shift, there was always someone working against me. But I wasn't the only one. Noah wasn't just the snake in the grass. He was part of a bigger web. The first few weeks after Noah's departure felt like a slow burn. My victory was still fresh, and the company was reeling from the fallout of the corruption I'd exposed. The changes I'd pushed for were taking root, but with each passing day, the resistance I faced became more apparent. It started small. Offhand comments from coworkers in the hallways, whispers behind closed doors. Some people were grateful for the transparency, but others, not so much. It was clear the reform I was implementing was shaking up a lot more than just Vance's crew. It was shaking the entire power structure. Then it started to get ugly. The first blow came when a few clients pulled out of deals. No one said it outright, but I knew the truth. Word had spread. Noah's influence, his connections at rival firms, had started to take effect. He had friends, and those friends were spreading dirt about the changes I was making. I couldn't ignore it anymore. A few weeks after the Jenkins pitch disaster, I sat down in my office, scrolling through emails, when I got a call from Imani, the head of our client relations team. Her voice was calm, but filled with concern. "We're losing ground with a few of our key clients," she said. "They're concerned about the transparency you've pushed for. They don't want their numbers public. They don't trust the system yet." I let out a long breath, staring at the pile of work on my desk. The changes I was making had come with a price, one that I hadn't fully anticipated. "What's the damage?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. "Some of them are pulling out of deals altogether," she replied. "A couple of board members are resigning too. They're not happy with how fast things are changing." I could feel the weight of it all pressing down on me. The stock dipped too. It was hard not to take it personally, but as the pressure mounted, I realized something. I was second-guessing myself. Had I gone too far? Was I pushing the company in the right direction? Or had I become too obsessed with exposing the rot? Imani could sense my hesitation. "Ethan," she said, her voice firm but supportive, "you're doing the right thing. Clients are scared of change. They don't like losing the power they had when the system was crooked. But what you're building here, it's going to work. Trust me." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had fought so hard to expose the corruption, to clean house and rebuild, but now the fallout was staring me in the face. I had to remind myself why I was doing this. This wasn't just about one deal. This was about long-term change. This was about creating something no one could erase. 2 days later, I got a glimmer of hope. Imani came back to my office with fresh data. "Look at this," she said, spreading out a report on my desk. "We've lost a few, but we've gained more. Clients like transparency. They like that we're not hiding anything. Word's starting to spread about the kind of company we're becoming. It's a long game, but we're winning." I glanced at the numbers, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a real sense of relief. The clients who stayed, they were the ones who appreciated what I was trying to do. They saw the value in a system that didn't play favorites. They saw the potential in a company that put integrity before profits. "See?" Imani said, smiling. "It's working. You just have to keep pushing." The shift was subtle at first. The stock dipped, yes. The clients who had pulled out, though significant, weren't the end of the world. Slowly but surely, we started regaining ground. More clients began to appreciate the transparency we were offering, and the tide started to turn. Clients were no longer just looking for results. They were looking for accountability, for fairness. The system I had helped build was starting to attract the kind of clients who valued those principles. It wasn't instant, and it wasn't easy, but the chaos I'd set in motion, it was paying off, and I was realizing something I hadn't seen before. The ethical reform I'd pushed for had started to create a new kind of trust in the company. Clients respected that we were willing to confront the tough issues and turn the ship around. We weren't just gaining back what we had lost. We were building a stronger foundation for the future. Later that week, I got an unexpected email from a woman named Maya. She worked at a rival firm and had heard about the changes I'd instigated. She was struggling with similar issues of corruption within her company and reached out, asking for guidance on how to start her own reform. It hit me then. What I had started wasn't just a victory for me, for the company. It was becoming a movement. Others were watching, learning from what we were doing, and taking steps to fix the broken systems in their own workplaces. I spent an hour on the phone with Maya, talking her through what I had done and what to expect, as she began her own journey toward reform. After we finished, I sat back in my chair, staring at the email thread. This was bigger than I had ever imagined. I wasn't just fighting against the system anymore. I was creating something that others could follow, something that couldn't be erased. The battle wasn't just about revenge. It was about building something no one could undo, something that would last. It had been a couple of months since I had taken the reins at the company, leading the overhaul that was slowly but surely turning things around. The new tracking systems were working as planned, the audits were catching discrepancies before they became problems, and employees were beginning to trust the system again. I'd had my doubts in the beginning, but now it felt like the company was on the right path. Then Vance made his move. The first sign came in the form of an official notice from our legal department. Vance, along with his lawyer, had filed a $4.2 million wrongful termination lawsuit against me and the company. The accusations that I had doctored evidence, tampered with company records, and deliberately ruined his career. Of course, he claimed he had nothing to do with the systematic alterations I had exposed, but this was Vance we were talking about. He was a master of deflection. At first, I thought I could ignore it, let the lawyers handle it. But as the days dragged on, the weight of his accusations began to hang in the air, heavier than I expected. Vance was gunning for me, trying to destroy everything I'd worked for, and he had no intention of going quietly. The lawsuit was messy. Vance and his lawyer were relentless. They tried to paint me as a rogue employee, someone who had acted out of personal spite rather than out of a genuine desire to fix a broken system. But I wasn't afraid. I had the truth on my side. I had the data. I had everything I needed to fight back. The deposition started with the usual back and forth, but it quickly became clear that Vance's legal team was grasping at straws. The moment they tried to discredit my evidence, I hit them with the cold, hard facts. I pulled out the same evidence I'd used to expose Vance before, the time-stamped logs, the system logins, the performance reports. It was airtight. They couldn't refute the evidence I'd presented. It was too clear, too precise. Then came the moment that turned the tide. In the middle of the deposition, when it seemed like I was losing ground to their aggressive questioning, I did something unexpected. I told them about my mother. My mom, I began, my voice steady but emotional, was a career woman, a strong, smart woman who built herself up from nothing. She was targeted in a similar way. Her career was ruined when she couldn't prove what was happening behind the scenes. She didn't have the evidence I have now. She was dismissed, and eventually, they made her the scapegoat. I could feel the room grow tense. The opposing lawyer didn't know how to respond. Vance's lawyer was silent, and even Vance himself looked uncomfortable. The words I spoke weren't just about me anymore. They were about the years of frustration I had felt. The way my mom had been pushed out of her career without a fight. I wasn't going to let the same thing happen to me, to this company. That's why I did what I did, I said, my gaze locked on Vance, who was staring at me like he was trying to size me up. Because when you're targeted, when they try to erase your work, you fight back, you stand up, and you make sure they can't get away with it. For a moment, there was silence, the kind that hangs in the air, heavy and full of unspoken words. But then Vance's lawyer shifted in his seat, and I saw it. The realization that I had just turned the tables. I wasn't just the guy who caught Vance in his web of lies. I was the guy who could prove it. I was the guy who wouldn't back down. 2 weeks later, Vance dropped the lawsuit. The news came through an email, something official from legal, and the relief that washed over me was immediate. Vance had been forced to back off, unable to face the truth any longer. He had been cornered, and now he was out of the picture for good. In the weeks that followed, I heard whispers in the hallways. There was a sense of victory, but also a quiet respect. People were starting to realize that I hadn't just exposed a corrupt system. I had fought back against someone who tried to ruin me, and I had won. Vance, on the other hand, never worked again. His reputation was in tatters, his career a casualty of his own arrogance. It was over for him, and he knew it. The final blow wasn't just the lawsuit. It wasn't even Vance's fall from grace. The real victory was in what happened after he left. The company started to change. I had done more than just dismantle Vance's empire. I had built something that could outlast him. The reforms I had put in place, systems that ensured transparency, that made every employee's work count, were working. The company was becoming stronger, more accountable, and more trustworthy. And I had become the face of that change. The battle with Vance was over, but the real fight, the one that mattered, had just begun. The dust had settled. The lawsuit from Vance was behind me. The company was beginning to thrive again, and the transparency systems I had fought for were becoming ingrained in the company culture. But I wasn't done yet. I had started something that was bigger than just this company, and I knew it. It was a Monday morning when I walked into the boardroom for the meeting with the executive team. This wasn't just another weekly check-in. This was my moment to propose the next big step, something that would change everything, something that would create a ripple effect far beyond these walls. The room was full of the usual faces, top executives, department heads, and of course, Lorraine Templeton, the CEO who had given me this chance in the first place. Everyone was seated and ready to hear what I had to say. I could feel the eyes on me. This wasn't just about restructuring compensation anymore. It was about industry-wide reform. I stood at the head of the table, my presentation on the screen behind me. "I'm proud of what we've accomplished here," I began, my voice steady. "We've rebuilt the trust in this company. We've made transparency the foundation of everything we do. But I'm not here to talk about what we've done. I'm here to talk about what we're going to do." A few murmurs rippled through the room, but I wasn't fazed. This was bigger than they thought. "I'm proposing we make our accountability data public. I want us to be the first firm in our sector to do this, to set the standard, to show the world that transparency, integrity, and fairness are more than just buzzwords." Lorraine raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "You're suggesting we make all of our data, performance metrics, bonus allocations, everything, available to the public, to our competitors?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "We have the systems in place. We've built the infrastructure. Now, it's time to lead by example. Let's show the world what it looks like when a company does the right thing, not just for profit, but for its people." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Then, Lorraine spoke up. "You're asking us to put everything on the table, every metric, every number, for everyone to see." "Exactly," I said. "And that's why it matters. No more hiding behind closed doors. No more manipulation. If we can show the world that we're holding ourselves accountable, it'll force the rest of the industry to follow suit. We'll lead the charge for real change." The room shifted. A few of the executives exchanged looks, some skeptical, others intrigued. But it was clear that the idea was starting to take hold. Lorraine leaned back in her chair, contemplating. "I see the vision," she said slowly. "But you're asking for a lot of trust. Trust from our clients, trust from our employees, and even from our competitors. Do you think they'll be willing to give us that trust?" I smiled, feeling the weight of everything I had fought for settle into place. The truth has always been the best strategy. The clients we've lost, they weren't our real partners, the ones who stuck around. They understand the value of integrity, and the competitors who are paying attention, they'll be forced to take notice. Lorraine nodded thoughtfully. "All right, Ethan, let's do it." The room broke into murmurs of approval, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my mission truly sink in. This wasn't just a win for me. It wasn't even just a win for the company. This was something that could shift the entire industry. A few weeks later, the decision was made. Our firm became the first in our sector to publicly disclose accountability data. Every metric, every performance review, and every bonus allocation was now available to anyone who cared to look. We had set a new precedent, and the ripple effect was immediate. Other companies began to follow suit. Some were hesitant, others outright critical, but slowly they began adopting similar transparency measures. They had no choice. The demand for integrity in business had never been higher, and those who didn't get on board were at risk of falling behind. And then, one afternoon, I got an email from a woman across the country. Her name was Sarah, and she worked at a firm that had been struggling with the same issues of corruption and inequality that we had. She had heard about what we were doing and reached out for help. "I don't know where to start," her message read. "We've been fighting against a broken system, but I don't know how to make a change. I saw what you did, and I need guidance. Can you help?" I spent an hour on the phone with her that day, explaining the steps we had taken, the challenges we had faced, and the rewards of pushing for reform. It was one of the most fulfilling conversations I'd had in a long time. It was then that I realized just how far this had gone. It wasn't just about fighting Vance or fixing our own company. It was about creating a movement, a wave of change that couldn't be stopped. As I sat back in my office that afternoon, staring out the window at the city below, it finally hit me. The battle was over. Vance was gone. The company had been rebuilt. But the real victory was in the legacy we were creating, a legacy of accountability, of truth, and of trust. I wasn't just part of a company anymore. I was part of a movement, and that, I realized, was something no one could erase.